Steve, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Well, happy to be back.
So for the audience, there are a couple Steve episodes. So I'm going to put the links in the show notes. You can go back in time, listen to those. You can catch up on who Steve is, his history with Al Schmitt, and then we do yet another episode after that. So a couple episodes to choose from. But today, we're going to do nothing but talk about Spinal Tap. And I can't be more happy about that. I was on my way back to the house and I was just like, I get to talk to Steve about making the new Spinal Tap record. How cool is that?
It's been pretty cool. It's been a big part of my life for the last year or so. Not that it took that long to make it, but it's happened over the last year. So.
Yeah. And the record's out, the movie's out.
Mm-hmm.
And the name of the album is
Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues.
The End Continues, right. Okay.
Which is the same as the movie.
All right. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in this project?
So I got a call from my buddy CJ Vanston, who has been musical director and a member of the band for, he's been their keyboard player and touring with them with Spinal Tap for over 30 years. And CJ and I, we play golf together. We're on the golf team at the tournaments and stuff like that. So we've known each other for a long time. So CJ called me one day and said, "Hey, we're going to make a Spinal Tap record. Do you want to engineer it?" And of course I said, "Absolutely. Yes. That sounds like fun. What are we doing?" And he said, "Yeah, well, let's work at the Village because the guys like it there. They've worked there before." I said, "Great. I love the Village." And we set dates it was about a month out. And that was kind of it, other than, it'll be, the guys playing and me playing keyboard and we have a new drummer and, it'll be tracking date. It was kind of old school record date, let's go into the studio and let's set up and let's record live. And, we'll spend a month or so doing that and then we'll mix it. So that was cool. And then a couple weeks later, he called back and said, "Look, before this, months before that, they had shot the movie. So the movie was already shot. The movie was in post-production. But what I was originally hired for was to make the album that was going to go along with the movie." So a couple weeks after that initial call from CJ, he called me back and said, "Hey, look, we need to go in a week early because we need to mix all of the music that's in the movie. That the guys wanted that done by us." So before we even started the record, we went into Village, Studio F at the Village, which is their Atmos room, even though we weren't mixing this in Atmos. And CJ and I went in, and so all the music parts you hear in the movie, the concert stuff at the end and all the interstitial rehearsal space things and all that audio that was recorded live, everything's recorded live. It's them playing everything. So we had to mix that for the film before we did the album. So we spent a couple of weeks doing that and then went down to Studio D at the Village and set up for making a record, which was really fun. It was kind of cool because obviously I got to see the movie and in the state it was in. It changed a little bit over the time, but it was nice to have a little bit more background of, what I was actually getting myself into, which was fun. And I had to go back and watch the original movie. I hadn't seen the original movie in years.
Oh yeah.
I had to find, and at the time it wasn't on streaming. I certainly have a DVD somewhere in the garage in a box or whatever. So I ended up just buying one off Amazon or wherever and eBay or whatever it was. And so before we did any of this, Linda and I sat down one night and had to watch the original movie, which was great to revisit.
What kind of prep, or whether it be technical prep or mental prep, do you do for a session like that?
Obviously, I've been doing this a long time. Getting ready to do an album like this is not out of the ordinary for me. There were a few things I wanted to have. Again, I haven't tracked a record like this at Village in a long time for this amount of time. I think the last time I did an album project like this particular one would have been at Capitol, where I had all my Capitol stuff. So one thing I did is I bought 4 more of these microphones because I knew I wanted to use these Beyer M500s. I love these mics for the guys' live vocal because they were going to do live vocals. Whether or not we kept them, was one thing, but they were going to be in the room playing and singing. So I got a couple more of these. So I think I have 4 or 5 of them now.
And just side tangent, why do you like the Beyer M500?
You know, somebody introduced it to me as a guitar mic many, many years ago. It's a ribbon mic. It's kind of like an M160. It's, you know, a hypercardioid ribbon mic. And I just really liked it. And they're not that expensive, although now after this comes out, I'm sure I'm driving the price up. Yeah. But they're not that expensive. They're really great mics. And then I started using them on, like, when I would do live performance things at Capitol, I started using it as a vocal mic, and I really liked it. They sound really good and they reject really well. So I had 1 or 2 of them already, but I knew I needed 4. So I ended up buying like 3 more. So now all mine have, because then I labeled them. So this is the David St. Hubbins mic, and I have a Nigel mic and a Derek mic. So
look for those on Reverb, everybody.
Exactly.
No, I joke.
No, these are sticking with me.
Yeah.
So it was really just, you know, wrapping my head around how I was going to do it, where we were going to put the amps, where we were going to put the drums, that kind of stuff. It's pretty simple. It's a 5-piece band, you know, bass, drums, 2 guitars, and keyboards, and that's it. So it was pretty simple as far as the setup goes. You know, we were in Village Studio D. I set the drums up kind of in the middle of the room. You know, if anybody who knows that room, it's kind of in front of there's a door to what they call the echo chamber. So Village has an echo chamber on one side of the room. And I actually kicked the door open, sandbags, and I put a couple mics in there. And then I just put all the guys around that. So the new drummer in the band her name's Valerie Franco. She was a drummer on the record. She was great. The best part was, I think we were going to start on a Monday. And so they said, yeah, you can have all day Sunday. You can load in, you can get drum sounds. You got a whole day to get drum sounds. I didn't know what to do with myself. So I've never had a whole day to get drum sounds. We loaded in, we got drum sounds in, you know, half an hour, and we were off and running the next day. So, yeah, it was fun. And then, you know, it was the usual kind of making a record, meeting the guys. Obviously, I knew from talking to CJ and everything that everything, they write everything, they play everything, they sing everything. It's all them. They're really very, very accomplished musicians. So none of that was ever an issue. And most of the songs had been demoed in some state. You know, all the guys have small home studios with Logic and all that kind of stuff. So we at least had, you know, tempos and a tempo map and a you know, rough guide of what it was going to be. So we could hear the demo. I would actually import the demo and the tempo map that they had into Pro Tools. Sometimes it changed, but so we would, you know, we could cut to their vocal if we wanted to, or if there was a really good vocal or whatever it was. But everything was demoed. So, you know, in synth form, the demos didn't sound great, but they worked. We could hear what the parts were. Yeah. And then we kind of went after it. It was actually really fun because we had 4 or 5 weeks that we were going to be working. And, you know, at the time there were probably 10 to 12 songs already written. You know, the guys were obviously still writing stuff. And we would come in and say, okay, we're going to do this song today. And we would cut it, do the overdubs, do the vocals, do the background parts. You know, we would kind of get a whole song in a day and then put it away. You know, we might have revisited later down the line for something, but a solo here or there, some odd keyboard parts or something like that. But for the most part, we kind of did a song a day and got through the whole song and finished it, which was great.
Was CJ producing?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. And playing.
And rough mixes at the end of the day to just, you know, so everybody knows what's, you know, the state of things.
Always. Yeah. And you know me, I'm always mixing as I go anyways. So, you know, I always had a rough mix running. But yeah, there was always a rough mix going. Although the guys weren't real interested in taking stuff home and listening. They were like, once they left the studio, they were like, all right, I'm done for the day. And they would go. And we did not work. We worked from like noon to 6 or 7 and we were done. It was great.
What about NDAs? Did you have to sign an NDA?
Surprisingly, I never signed anything. Never signed an NDA. I don't know if any of the other people did. You know, it was pretty much just the musician, you know, the band, me, my assistant, Nick from the Village. We had, you know, a guitar tech, a production assistant, production coordinator. That was pretty much the only people in the room. So once in a while, Rob Reiner would come by and check on progress and stuff. But
Rob.
That was, yeah, because Rob's definitely he's part of the band. Yeah, exactly.
In typical WCA fashion, I'll ask this. Since you're no longer working for Universal directly as an employee, who are you billing?
The band is signed to Interscope, which is a Universal label. I just build I'm an independent engineer. So I would just build the record company as an independent engineer. I'm pretty sure his billing was straight to the record company, not to the band. It went straight to the record company for this stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
I believe the movie was billed to the movie company. Like when we worked on mixing the film, that was a separate thing than the record. The record was all about the record, all went to the record company. So, yeah. And I just worked on a day rate, my usual day rate.
What time of the day would you start? What time would you roll out typically?
Yeah, typically we had a noon downbeat. I was always there 10:30 or 11 just because I'm always early. Usually when I was there, 10:30, 11, Chris Guest was right on my heels. He was always early. He's just his personality. So he was early learning his parts, whatever he wanted to do. He'd bring a new guitar in, whatever it was. And then the guys would roll in and we'd start around noon. Record for a couple hours and then, kind of usually get the basic track done in an hour or two, have lunch, and then continue on with whatever overdubs we needed to do or any of that. And usually we were done by 6 or 7, which was great. A few nights I would stay later and clean stuff up and do that kind of stuff, but not really. And then, they all have other jobs too. So Harry's doing The Simpsons. So there were a couple days a week where we knew Harry would be unavailable. So we knew we didn't have Harry on Fridays or whatever it was. I think it was Fridays. So, when we worked on Friday, obviously that was an overdub day or a cleanup day or whatever it was because we didn't have the full band there. We didn't work Sundays. It's pretty civil.
Wow. Very adult.
Yeah, exactly.
Were they in character or not?
No, not unless they were performing.
Okay.
But no, in the studio, it was Chris and Mike and Harry. we had one day, they called it a wig day, wig, WIG, where we had cameras in the studio. And that was the day that we had David and Nigel and Derek in the studio, where they had the wigs and the costumes and the whole thing. But for the most part, no, it was just the guys. So
was it hard to resist laughing at a lot of the stuff?
Oh, there was no resistance. The whole thing was laughing. I mean, it was top to bottom laughing. I mean, these are 3 of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And you learn very quickly, don't try to keep up. They're quicker than you, they're faster than you, their jokes are funnier than you. I mean, not that it was like, don't talk or anything like that, but they're just really good at it. I mean, and all funny in different ways, which is great. Chris is very dry. And he would tell a joke and it would take a second to land. And then you'd be like, oh my God, that was, you bust out laughing because it was hysterical. But no, they were not in character, but there were all kinds of characters that came out, in the room and all that kind. We always I had a second computer loaded with a little interface in Reaper that was just, we would come in the day and just hit record and just let it run. I don't know if we ever used anything from it. It just literally ran all day long.
Recording what?
Just the output of the console. So whatever was going on in the room, because most of the time they were out in the room. They all sat in the room and played. When somebody did an overdub, they went out we weren't moving back and forth or anything like that. So if they were out in the room, and there was lots of banter and shenanigans and all that kind of stuff going on. So,
well, we've already had the Trogs tape, so maybe it's time for the Spinal Tap version.
And in many characters, because they have many characters. So
in breaking with WCA tradition, let's, to satiate all the people tuning in who might be one-off listeners, just because of Spinal Tap. Talk to me a bit about, technologically what went on, mic choices, preamp choices, what was the strategy?
Village has an 88R console, which I'm very familiar with. They have a BCM10 Neve sidecar also. So I had 10 more vintage Neve preamps and then a couple oddball preamps, mostly Neve type stuff. So actually all of the drums went through the 88R. I used the preamps on the 88R. And I probably used some dynamics on the 88R too. I actually like the compressors on the 88R for just a little, keep the kick and snare in check a little bit in case she unloaded on me. But very little compression on the drums. Very little EQ, basic EQ on the drums. Drum mics, kind of a typical, couple in the kick, couple on the snare, hi-hats, toms, overheads. I think I had a couple mics, like I had a mono overhead of Coles just over the top that I could beat up with a distressor or something like that. I think I had another mic, a D19 probably, just stuck inside the drum kit somewhere for some attitude if I needed it. Didn't get used all that much. And then I did have like 3 sets of room mics because I also knew going in this was a universal project, so I knew there was going to be an Atmos mix eventually. I don't know when I was actually told that, but I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I had a couple sets of room mics. I used my Vanguard. I have a Vanguard V44, the stereo mic. That was one of them, and I think a couple 87s. And then again, the Village has that echo chamber there, which is just a big echo chambery room. And I kicked the door open and I put a couple of RCA 44s in there and recorded that for ambience also. And then the drum kit would change a little bit song by song depending on what we were doing, but it was mostly like tune up the snare, tune down the, put a pillow in the kick, take the pillow out of the kick, that kind of stuff. Nothing major tune difference from song to song.
Is it still common practice to have is it Ross, the drum doctor, come in?
He wasn't on this, but
okay.
Yeah, but Ross is still around. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we did have one tech, this guy Sarush was taking care of guitars and drums. So if we needed something done, he could do it. Val's a very competent drummer, so she could tune her own kit.
Yeah.
One song, Russ Kunkel came in and played drums on the song Flower People, because he was the original drummer on Flower People. And while we were making the album, the Immediate Family movie was coming out, and they did a couple screenings upstairs at the Village while we were there. So the guys kept coming down and hanging out. The Immediate Family guys, Cooch and Lee Sklar, and we said, well, Russ is here, and he's in the original movie. You'll see him. He's the original drummer in Flower People. So we had him come in and play on that one song. And that's one of the songs Elton John sings on the record.
That's super cool that he came in to play drums.
Absolutely. And then bass, pretty easy. I had a DI and an amp. Harry has his amps. So it was I think I used an RE20 on the amp. And I have a Con tube DI that we used. Harry had, I think he showed up with 4 basses, and I believe the only difference was they were all different colors, but they were the exact same bass. And Harry's a great bass player. And then the other guys, it was funny, Marshall has, and I wish I knew the number off the top of my head. There are these Marshall, they're like half stacks. So it's like 2, like picture half of a Marshall. So they're only like this wide. And really great, a combo, a head and a cabinet. And of course, being Spinal Tap, the 2 we had went to 11.
Of course.
Of course.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
Exactly. And we started with those amps, and then the guys have their pedal boards and stuff, but we started with those amps, and we had some other amps laying around, and we had every intention of swapping amps around and doing all that stuff. But every time we came to something, those amps sounded great. So we just used them. It's Spinal Tap, so a lot of the guitar sounds, it's Nigel. So a lot of it's very processed anyways. It's, his pedal board thing. So a lot of the sounds came from the pedal board. And then I had a 57 and a Royer on each one of those, and I would just blend to taste. All the bass and the guitars went through the Neve sidecar, the BCM10, and then fed into, I think I had a distressor on each guitar and like an LA2A on the bass. And I would blend the guitar mics to tape, the 57 and the Royer, because I had the BCM10, which has faders and bus outs. So I would adjust the faders to taste. And then if I needed EQ, but I don't think I used that much. And so they would print as one channel.
That was going to be my next question.
And then on each amp, I had a room mic. So I had a mic, a TLM 170 about 6 feet away. And they were in their own booths. So I did have a little bit of an ambient type mic that got printed separately. And I did record, see, it's all coming back now. So I did record a DI, but that was more to make editing easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's always just easier to edit when you have a DI signal. It was never intended to be used, or if we needed to reamp something, I knew I would have it. We didn't end up doing that.
Is it easier to edit from a visual perspective or a sonic perspective?
Visual perspective,
because
you
can see the start of the waveform.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a overdriven guitar, it's just
right,
it just looks like a sausage. Exactly. So I learned that trick a while ago, and actually, what I do is I record the DI. So I would blend the mic, right? But I recorded to one stereo track. So the left side had the DI, the right side had the actual mics, and then I use a trim plugin and just mute the DI so that I'm only editing one track at a time. If that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. But you said you used these buyers on the vocals live. Did you recut the vocals at all? And did you use the same mics or different mics?
So the guys would sing live most of the time. And then I believe on the album, probably 80% of it, I cut with a 47. We had a vocal setup, and whoever was the main singer on that song, would go out. We had a vocal setup, and they would go out and sing on the 47.
Okay.
A couple times, I think Harry, a couple times, we just left him in his seat where he was, and he sang into the buyer. And one or two times we recorded acoustic guitar, and I just turned the mic down, pointed it at the guitar, and just used it as an acoustic guitar mic also, because it was there. It was easy.
Any EQ compression that was typical on the main vocal chain, the 47 vocal chain?
I believe I had an LA2A on the vocal and just tapping it. Really.
Of course. I mean, all those years spent with Al,
Exactly. Yeah. I now have a pair of the Summit TLA 100s that I used all the time.
Yeah.
But I bought them after I think we did the record. So,
yeah.
But I have those now.
Yeah. Because audience, Al would have used the Summit.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how long top to bottom, like if you added up all the time, condensed all the time down, what would you say it took to record everything?
I want to say we were in there for 5 weeks total, kind of a Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday type deal. And then after everything was recorded, we went to Studio F at the Village, which is an S6 room. Again, it's their Atmos equipped room. It's got a little vocal booth on the side. I mean, we weren't obviously not doing Atmos, but it had, so after we finished tracking, everything went in the box. And that was a decision that CJ and I both made early on. We both agreed right away, mixing in the box, because neither one of us I love mixing in the box now. It's great. And the S6, I know my way around the S6 enough to where, I'm not a ninja on it, but I can certainly get around on it pretty well. So actually, now that I think about it, again, it's coming back, and there's a second part to this, because this was actually kind of 3 projects, the movie, this, and then there's another one that's continuing. But I believe between the tracking and the mixing, I think there was like a 2-week break in there. And I actually came here to my place and set everything up, all the in the box stuff. So I started the mixes here at my place. So did all the IO and got everything in the box, and kind of did the basic setup and mixing here. And then took those sessions to the Village where everybody was, and and then we would mix, CJ and I on the faders and the guys sitting behind us.
Right. So would they sit there during your mixing process?
Yeah, sort of. Again, I started a lot of it here by myself. Typically when we started mixing, it would be, okay, we're going to do this song today, whatever it was. I Kissed a Girl. I would show up at, 10:30, 11, kind of get the mix together. CJ would show up noonish, and then the guys would show up 12:30, 1 o'clock, whatever it was. So I typically spent a couple hours by myself, and then it was kind of, the group mixing at that point. And there was no contention or anything like that. I mean, it was just like mixing any other record. Again, these guys have been through this enough times where nothing was unfamiliar to them.
Right.
They've made a lot of records. They've toured, they've made movies. So, they definitely had their opinions, but they weren't, there was no bad feelings or anything like that. It was quite fun.
Yeah. I always feel that I don't know, I feel compelled to keep everybody entertained in that situation when you have people around you and, well, what are you doing right now?
They don't need me to entertain them.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, was that a distraction to have those guys back there cutting it up behind you?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, well, which is kind of why, I mean, I like kind of mixing on my own now. So that's why I would kind of show up early and get kind of the ugly work out of the way. Mm-hmm. If anything needed tuning, any of that kind of stuff, we did that kind of without an audience. But there wasn't much of that anyways. But no, they were great. The hardest part was like getting back to work sometimes, because you're just having so much fun listening to the stories and hanging out and, shooting the shit with the guys, that sometimes it was like, oh, look, we haven't done anything for an hour and a half.
Yeah. We're burning through money.
Exactly. But we had fun. So.
Okay. So you, correct me if I'm wrong, you mixed it in stereo first, and then it was revealed that you needed Atmos mixes, right?
It was revealed very early on. So I knew very early on that there was going to be Atmos. And CJ and I talked about it, and there were some parts, he would, because again, he's a keyboard player and a producer. So when we got to the ear candy type stuff, sometimes he'd be like, do we like this or this? And I'd be like, do both, because I'm going to put one there and one there. And he was like, okay, great. Yeah, we'll put them both on. So we knew very early on that there was going to be an Atmos mix. The other thing, when we did get to Studio F, again, I mentioned they had a booth. So there were a couple times where we had to actually go back and like re-record a vocal or re-record a solo. And I did very distinctly remember Michael coming in one day and saying, we have to recut this vocal. It doesn't sound like David. It sounds like me, meaning Michael. Like it wasn't a David, and it wasn't in character enough of a vocal sound. So we actually that happened a couple times. It happened with Chris on guitar one time too. We had a solo and he came in and he said, it's not Nigel enough. We have to redo it. So he had to redo it more in a Nigel way, which was something I had never encountered before, obviously.
All new territory.
All new territory. And they were right every time. Like, oh, now that you mention it, you're right. I don't hear enough of the English accent or whatever it was. It's like, no, you're right. That does sound like Michael. It doesn't sound like David. So yeah. But then they would go out and just redo it. I mean, all these guys were 2-3 passes of vocals and we were done.
Yeah.
2-3 passes, maybe punch here, punch there. Background vocal parts, I would put them all around one mic. If they were singing together, we just put them all around one mic. Those took a little longer because it was kind of working out parts, so, but again, they could be like, Mike, you sing this note, Chris, you sing this note, Harry, you sing this note, and they could do it because they're really great musicians. So, it was, that part of it was simple, but there was some working out parts to do. And they're very helpful with it too, because again, they're really good musicians. So a lot of times they would work out those parts themselves.
So mix prep work would take place at your house, and then you'd bring it in, show up a little early, do a little extra, and then mix. And then what kind of time were you spending on the mixes?
Oh, it was probably a whole day for one song. Okay. Basically, song a day.
Minimal revisions?
Minimal. We might have gone back 1 or 2 times. Again, we were all in the box. So I think after we had everything mixed, we kind of reviewed everything. Rob would come in once a week or so and he'd want to hear stuff. There were a couple times back and forth. Again, we have guests on this record. So Paul McCartney's on it. Elton John's on it. They didn't come to the Village. They did their vocals because both of them were in England at the time. So they did their vocals. So there was a little bit of back and forth with their vocals. Nothing bad, just, we need the track. Okay, here's the track. When, we'll do it on Saturday and send you the vocal, that kind of thing. So there was a little bit of that. There was one song, and we can talk about it. Stonehenge, the last song on the record, was a little bit of a different process to, wrap up with the mixing thing. Typical album. Because we were in the box, we knew we could come back a week later and pull something up. So once in a while, there would be hey, I was listening. I think, that acoustic guitar thing needs to come up a little bit. And I could literally double click, pull it up, make the change.
Who handles the responsibility of maintaining the backup to this record as it's being made?
It's all me.
All you. Okay, so what was the strategy there?
I had 2 drives, a master drive, a backup drive, that I kept. I'm pretty good about updating my backups as I go. And then we had another backup that Village would do at night. So I would take the master drive home with me. Village would keep the backup drive. They would do a backup into their system. And then usually like once a week, I would back it up into my system here, which is just onto some drives and then up to my backblaze.
Okay.
Yeah. But typically it's 2 drives, a master and a backup.
And no issues along the way?
Never had a problem. Knock on something that's wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, I was the only one. I was operating all the Pro Tools. Once in a while, Nick, my assistant, would do something if we were tracking. If I was getting drum sounds, he might run Pro Tools for a second. But for the most part, I did all the Pro Tools work also, which was fine with me. I was sitting in front of the machine, especially when we got up to Studio F and everything was in the box. It's kind of a one-man show anyways. We could have faders. So when we would be mixing, CJ would be like, oh, let me ride the keyboard parts. And I would, he had faders on my left side and I could, okay, there's the keyboard faders. Go for it, arm it and go. So I use VCAs a lot. So I would give him VCAs and he could do whatever he wanted with them. So, and one or two times we would overdub up there too. If we had to do a background part or guitar solo or something like that. There were a couple guitar solos that got pushed off to the end. I don't know why. I think just because.
And we'll talk about the Stonehenge thing, but I also I don't want to forget, tell me about the Atmos mixing.
Mm-hmm.
You mixed the stereo. So did you just reopen the session and just kind of reroute everything?
Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of time. We finished this album in so I guess we started last September-ish. It was right around this time. And it took us a couple of months. Certainly by middle of November, we were pretty much done with the record. And we made a conscious decision. We didn't master the record right away because we knew the record wasn't coming out until the movie was going to come out. And at the time, they were still kind of working on the movie and then going through the process of getting distribution and all that kind of stuff that happens on movies. So we didn't master right away because we didn't want to master and then have somebody come back. We knew we had months before it was going to come out and somebody goes, hey, we got 3 new songs, or hey, can we remix this, or hey, can we do that? So we kind of left the mastering. Once we had a release date and all that stuff, then we went to master. Gavin Lurson did the mastering. It was great. Once that was done, then I knew we had an album. Then I went after the Atmos mixes. And yes, so I did those here at my place. That was just me. I did them. I mean, I knew where everything was. I set up a template based on my Atmos template with a little bit of tweaks to accommodate for what I knew was on this record, as far as effects and that kind of stuff. So yeah, basically I opened my sessions, I had an Atmos template and I imported the tracks I needed to import and I panned stuff where I wanted it panned and off we went to the races. It was fun. The Atmos was really fun, especially because it had been a few months. So I had this, huge, 4 or 5 month break between the album. And so going back and revisiting it was really fun. I had a totally fresh take on it. And I knew that it wasn't going to be too crazy. It's a rock band. So it's 2 guitars, bass and drums. And then I did have enough keyboard parts and ear candy and stuff like that to move some stuff around and, bring it into the room. Once I had all the Atmos mixes done, CJ and Chris and I went to one of the rooms at Universal, the mailroom, the big PMC Atmos room there. And I played the whole record for them and they loved it. They were the 2 guys, Chris was the only guy available at the time and the other guys were like, yeah, everybody else went off to their other jobs. But they were like, look, if Chris likes it, we all like it.
Right.
Also, within that time, I got contacted by Universal catalog department because they were reissuing the Break Like the Wind album in special box sets and stuff. So I ended up remixing that in Atmos, which was way more hard because that was a record that was done on analog tape in 1992 or whatever it was. So with that one, I had to go through the process we've talked about ad nauseum, where tapes had to be transferred and had to go the whole thing.
The rebuild,
which was rebuild, mixing from scratch. Yeah, sometimes with no track sheets. There were four different producers on the record. That took way longer than the new record.
Did you do the rebuild?
I did the rebuild. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't do the transfers, but I did the rebuild. Yeah, I was handed files with transfers on them.
Okay.
That was it. Analog tape. Except for one. There was one tape that was digital, like an old Mitsubishi machine.
Yeah, you may have done a post, or I may have seen another post from somebody else that it came out, and I thought, oh, Steve probably did that.
So that was fun too. So I got to play that, Chris, also, which was kind of fun hearing the difference between Spinal Tap in 1992 and Spinal Tap in 2025.
Yeah, what were the differences that were apparent?
Well, the Break Like the Wind had more. They had more guests, obviously. There's one song that's got Lukather and Satriani and Steve Vai and all those guys. So there was that kind of thing. Just the structure of the songs was a little bit different. I think at that time, there weren't a lot of keyboards and stuff like that on those records. They're really bass drums, guitar driven. Whereas the newer record and some of the records in between have more, I don't want to say production elements, but more of that kind of stuff. There were no strings on the old records, stuff like that. We did have strings on a couple records on the new. We did it with the Budapest Orchestra. We just did those remotely. They were very simple, just simple pad stuff. Nothing complicated.
Sonically, big difference between the two albums?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Production values have changed, right?
Right. But the Break Like the Wind was, early 90s. That was kind of hankering back to the 80s rock and roll. So that had a lot more big AMS reverbs, stuff like that on the drums. Whereas the new record doesn't have quite that much stuff.
Was there a lot of stuff that was printed that?
No, hardly anything.
Okay.
No, and at one point it was funny because at one point I got a couple of reels where I had the master and the slave, and because of the way these things were done, I would get 24 channels of a master and 24 channels of a slave, and they weren't time code locked, so I would just get files, so I had to line them up, which 9 times out of 10 is not a problem because there's usually a drum track or a click track or something like that. You just line them up. On these two reels, there was nothing common to both reels except a time code. Well, I don't have time code, and I was pissed. I was like, Jesus, shoot. And I went to the pictures of the reels because I would get pictures of the reels and the track sheets and all that stuff. And I went to the picture. I said, engineer Nico Bolas. I said, you son of a bitch.
And you called him Nico.
So, and then assistant engineer Mike Prasante, who's T-Bone Burnett's engineer, who's been a friend of mine for 20 years. He was an assistant at Sunset Sound back in the day. He was Nico's assistant. So I immediately texted those guys with pictures like, you assholes. You got me.
Was Nico like, good luck?
Oh yeah. They both had a great laugh over it. I was like, just when I can remember the conversation. 30 years, that won't matter. That's going to matter to some schmuck 30 years from now. Well,
right.
Here's the schmuck. So I actually had to find I found a little Mac program that reads time code off of digital. Like I could feed it the time code channel off of the analog tape.
Really?
And look at the numbers. Yeah, I could look at the numbers and I could make a cut. I figured out if I cut that channel, the last number would stay on the screen. So I actually did it backwards to line them up. It took like an hour or two.
What is this? What is this piece of software?
You know what? I don't have it on this computer because I have a new computer since then. It was like time code read or something like that.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It was a little free thing. I'll find it for you
Okay.
and let you know what it was.
That'd be great.
But at least you can see the code, you know. So.
Okay, so what's up with Stonehenge? Why was that a different thing?
Stonehenge was a little different because for some reason, I don't know. Oh, I know why it was decided. So if you've seen the movie, and the movie's out now, so it's not a big deal. The last song in the movie is Stonehenge, performed live, and Elton John sings it live. And they cut when they were listening. So basically, they used the click from the original version of Stonehenge off of the Break. I think it's the Break Like the Wind, or I guess it was the original album. It wasn't Break Like the Wind. No, I'm sorry. They recut Stonehenge in the early 2000s for an album. And that's the tempo map that they used when they shot the movie. So drummer was listening to the click. So we thought, why reinvent the wheel on this thing? Let's just go find the original tracks. So we found the multi-track that they cut in the early 2000s that Ed Cherney was the engineer on and Greg Bissonette played drums on. So we took that multi-track, lined it up. So we took the drums and the bass and like the background vocals and the keyboard parts and that kind of stuff from that multi-track, put Elton's vocal on it, put some new Spinal Tap vocals on it, put a couple new elements. So the new Stonehenge is a amalgamation of the one they cut in the early 2000s that Ed Cherney was the engineer on and this new one. Just it all lined up and it was great. It worked. There's actually some strings that were from another thing that like a live show they had done once, I think. Wow. I'm not sure they actually made the record. I think we ended up taking all those out. You know, it was like, why are we going to go on this epic journey if we don't have to, you know?
So that's Greg on drums?
Greg Bissonette, yeah.
Interesting.
And there's no secrets here. He's credited on the record. So that's
right.
Like a big secret that
well, and they
that.
credited Ed, right? Okay.
Absolutely. We made sure. Yeah, absolutely. That was,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Stonehenge was a little different. And again, we had Elton's vocal, which was great. There were a couple of the Nigel parts I actually stole from the film version because they were funnier in the movie than the one he did. So I swiped them from there, which was kind of fun going back and forth.
Making a record like this in comparison to other records that might take themselves a little more seriously. I mean, clearly there's a seriousness to this, but it's all in good fun and it's just a different vibe. So does it give you a different perspective on making records in general to go through a record making process like that? Like,
not really, because when it comes down to it and the basic concept making records with these guys is the music is dead serious. There's nothing funny about the music. The music it's them playing, it's dead serious, it's in tune, it's in time, it's the right chords, all that. The funny is the lyric. But the approach to it is dead serious. It's just when you read the lyric sheet, it's hysterical. But other than that, no, it was exactly the same. Now, there are elements of the music that maybe punctuate a funny part here or there. So we had to make sure that those things, you know, there's a couple little moments like that probably stick out a little more than they should. If I was just mixing a straight record, because it goes along with the lyric. You know, this lyric happens and then this little sound happens. So they have to be, you know, you have to, sometimes you're making a cartoon, but most of the time you're making a record.
Back to the Atmos for a minute. Did you have somebody master the Atmos or did you master it?
I mastered it. I did it all myself. Again, I had the mastered version to match, which we did it. So I will say on this record, because of the style of the music, I used a little more bus compression, stuff like that than I normally would. And we told Gavin, you can go, because he called me when we were going to do the record. He said, you know, I know usually when we do records for you, you know, you like it to be pristine and not a lot of, I said, no, on this one, do what you got to do. Make this a rock and roll record. We want that, you know, Metallica, AC/DC kind of, that's what it is. And he was like, okay, great. So he might have done a little more mastering, quote unquote, than he normally would on a record of mine. which I was all for, and it sounds great. They did a great job. So I did have to use a little more, even in the Atmos. It's where actually the new Waves plugin, the immersive wrapper, came in handy.
Right.
Yeah, I think this was the first record I really gave that a big workout. It worked really well. Most stuff went through my object bed, just straight through the object bed. There's very few things that got pulled out into their own objects. But that's also the nature of the album too. Again, it's a bass, drums, guitar record.
So for the audience though, I want to emphasize something here that I almost forgot, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. So the way I work now started from Steve. So you taught me pretty much everything I needed to know to get up and running in Atmos, and I've since deviated.
You sat right there.
I did. I sat right there. It was like my own personal mix with the Masters weekend with you, and I was going to say we had such a great time. I had such a great time. I hope you all had a good time.
Absolutely.
Hope I didn't annoy your wife too much. But so the way I work now, obviously it's deviated a bit from that, but for the most part, it all goes back to you and how you started to work in Atmos. And when people talk about object beds, sometimes people ask me, well, how come you don't use the bed? I'm like, because I was taught to use object beds. Steve Genewick taught me that. And how can you go wrong?
And now the object bed that I came up with one day trying to solve a problem is now part of Pro Tools, so which is great. It's much easier now.
It is.
It's much easier now.
Got so much easier since I first learned which was about 5 years ago.
Too. A lot of the things I came up with early on Atmos wise, I'm still using. So like my reverbs where one send hits 9 different ones in the pre-delay scheme, and everybody can go back and find all that stuff. I've talked about it enough times. But I still use a lot of that stuff. Again, I use the object bed still. It's a little bit easier in Pro Tools now because it's embedded in Pro Tools. So, now you can put, a multi-channel plug-in on the object bed where before you couldn't. We had to jump through all these hoops. It's a little bit easier now to do that. Typically on the record, traditionally on a lot of the records I did, I never used a lot of bus compression. It was always just a couple dB of compression, very little EQ. Again, those are the records I make. That's how I was taught. On the Spinal Tap record, I treated it more like a rock and roll record that it is. So I did have an SSL bus compressor, and I did have a limiter on it, just to make it pump a little bit more. So when I got to the Atmos mix, and again, I knew Gavin had mastered this. He had used some compression and a little bit of limiting on it too. So I knew that had been done. So when I got to the Atmos mix, having that immersive wrapper and having the object bed and 99% of the tracks going through the object bed, I could reproduce that type of compression, which was great to have. Where, 5 years ago, I couldn't have done it. Maybe I could have, but I would have had to jump through hoops to do it, and it wouldn't have done the exact same thing. So some of the new tools are really, again, so valuable.
I know. Valuable. Yeah, so much has changed since you got involved, and then once I got involved and learned from you till now, like it's so much easier. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. Certainly faster.
Yeah.
You can set up and get through a mix faster. And I've done, I know you're doing it too. There's been a couple records where I've done the Atmos and the stereo at the same time.
Still doing it.
Yeah. I don't do it every time. It depends on kind of what else is going on around it. Mm-hmm. Like I knew on Spinal Tap, it was going to be, nobody was going to want to wait the little bit of extra time it would have been for me to do some of the things in Atmos to get the stereo to line up, So I kind of was like, no, let's just treat these as two separate things. It'll be easy enough to port over. But I have been doing it on a few records. It certainly works.
And it's when you're in the heat of the moment too, I assume that, when you have the members of Spinal Tap behind you, you want to just cut to the chase, and you don't want to be chasing stuff because of,
exactly
any template concepts that you're messing around with, and you just want to get the work done.
Oh, that was panned in the back, but nobody's in, but we're not listening in Atmos, so nobody knows that,
right?
Stuff like that. So, I didn't want to deal with any of that stuff with clients sitting behind me.
What I'm interested to see, because I know sometimes we can, as audio professionals, when you work on a certain thing and it has any amount of success, you tend to like start to like get more of those genre records and get pigeonholed into that area. This is not a Diana Krall record like you've made in the past.
No.
No, not at all. So I'm curious if we're going to see you end up working on more rock records of that nature moving forward.
I hope so. It's odd because, the way my career has gone because of where I worked at Capitol, I actually do a lot more stuff, like more diverse stuff than I think some people think I do.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of did find a niche with like big band and orchestral stuff because I know how to do it and it's not a common thing. There's not a ton of people that know how to do that kind of a record, which is great. And I still love it. But for instance, like last week, I was working on some stuff for the Emmys and, I was cutting a country pop type song with Vince Gill, so it's not like I don't do this stuff. It may not be a whole album, but who makes albums anymore?
Some people do.
Some people do. I know.
Well,
yeah.
Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap, absolutely. So I would hope so. I mean, I love doing it. It was funny. I got a call while I was doing this record, mixing at my house. I was recommended by one client of mine to a friend of theirs to mix something that was more big bandy. And in conversation with the guy, he's like, I usually do kind of more pop stuff, but this has big band horns and, the mixes weren't coming out right. And I talked to so-and-so and he gave me your name that you're the guy to do it. And I was like, yeah, okay. It sounds like exactly, what I do. And yeah, I'd be happy to help. He said, just out of curiosity, what else are you working on now? Anything fun? And I said, well, actually, I'm mixing this new Spinal Tap record. He was like, you're kidding. He goes, you do that kind of stuff too? I said, yeah, I do all kinds of stuff like that. He goes, I may have a couple more songs for you then.
Yeah.
And he did. He sent me 2 more songs that were not big band, that were more kind of pop genre-ish. So,
and I mean, it's not a ridiculous question from a person like that calling you because, some people are the right person to mix hip hop, the right person to mix country, rock, whatever. And some people don't cross over very well.
Yeah. Again, my background, I've been exposed to so many different genres of music and so many different things. I mean, again, I work on like the Oscars every year. That could be a different genre of music every 3 minutes, So switching between that stuff is pretty simple for me. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten movie scoring gigs because it was more of an album artist that was making the movie, doing the music for the movie. And so the production coordinator called me like, you can speak both languages, so we want you on this because you'll understand what the movie guys are asking for, but you'll also be able to treat this like a record date kind of thing, which I like. I think it's fun.
I think it's super cool that you're able to mix in your living room still in Atmos for a major record like this. And I mean, this is not the only record you've worked on in your living room. I know that. You worked all through the pandemic, in your living room. So
pretty much everything I've mixed in since 2020 has been mixed here. So, and it's my living room, but it's a legit studio. I got enough space here. I got my PMC speakers. I got my S1s. I got all my stuff. So, I took, again, mixes I started here, walked over to the Village, had the exact same stuff, same speakers, same, not the exact same speakers, but the S1s, S6, all compatible, same plugins, everything. I can move back and forth seamlessly. So I'm going to do it again next week. So the next part of the Spinal Tap saga is, for years, Harry Shearer, also known as Derek Smalls, has made solo records. Well, after the Spinal Tap record was done, Harry kept writing. So we're actually in the middle of what's probably going to end up being an entire Harry Shearer record. So with just Harry, doesn't have the Spinal Tap guys on it. It's just Harry and CJ's on it and producing it. And we have a couple studio musicians.
As his character or as Harry?
Mm-hmm. No, as Derek Smalls.
They should all do that like Kiss did that.
Yeah. I mean, they all work on music. Michael, not so much because his acting career is is much more active than the other guys. You know, Chris makes music every day. He's got a studio at his house. You know, he would come in and play me stuff that he was making. But it's usually more acoustic-y. Like he loves to play mandolin, stuff like that. It's not Spinal Tap-ish. But I know he plays, and now whether or not he wants to do anything with that is up to him. I don't know, but it's good stuff.
Okay, very working class audio of me to ask you this. How long will you have to wait to get paid from Interscope?
Oh, it was fine. I was good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Not an excruciatingly long wait. Okay.
No.
That's good.
Not at all. You know, we've got the Uniport dialed in. My wife does all the billing and she knows how to navigate Uniport.
That's
and
right.
We also had a production coordinator on this project. So we had one person, Joanne Tomonaga, and she was able to, you know, okay, I'm submitting all the bills and they would all go to the right person and at the right time and in the right format and all that kind of stuff. So,
okay.
And we had a person that was like, okay, you know, here's everybody and now everybody will get paid. So we did have people that were kind of on top of that kind of stuff.
Well, that makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
But the fact that Linda is now like hip to, you know, the universal port system.
Oh yeah. Definitely. I mean, I still do a lot of work for Universal. They're still the biggest record label in the world. Yeah. I still do Atmos mixing for them. I mean, not as much as I used to, but still a significant amount. And quite a few of my clients are Universal clients. So it's not, you know, I'd say probably half my work is record label stuff. The other half is probably maybe less than half is record label these days. Still, but a lot independent, which is great.
Well, it sounds like it was a really fun record to work on.
It was a great record to work on. It was great. It was And now to see it a year later when, you know, the movie's coming out and, you know, I actually saw it in a theater with an audience last week for the first time, which was fun.
Are you in the
I've probably
credits
seen it
because
5 or 6 times. Yeah.
That's right. Because you mixed some stuff for it.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's great.
And then, you know, the album is great. The cover is funny. It's you know, Henry Diltz shot the cover. It's like the Crosby, Stills and Nash cover in front of
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. I haven't seen a physical copy of the record yet. And then on top of it, then I had to okay the vinyl because we cut vinyl too. So when they cut the vinyl, they had to send that to me and I had to okay that because I have a turntable here. So
well, I'm sure it'll do well. I've already talked to a few people who are making a point of going to see the movie, and
it's funny. If you're a fan of the first movie, you'll be a fan of the second movie. It's really great. So
I'm sure they're going to have, you know, showings of come see the first one and come see the next one.
It was really a treat to be able to make a record with these guys and to get to know them and see the behind the scenes and, you know, be a little bit of part of this thing.
Well, always great to see you and chat with you. For the audience, link will be in the show notes to all the Spinal Tap stuff. Steve's website will be in there, and you know, anything pertinent to the conversation. And if you find that piece of software that reads SMPTE time code, yeah, let me know, and we'll put that in there too for everybody that loves that. And then I should put an affiliate link to the M500 buyer, and everybody can buy them up before they, you know, don't get too expensive.
Yeah, I have my 5, so
yeah, so you're set for the zombie apocalypse.
I'm good.
Yeah,
I use them on guitars all the time. I still use them on guitars all the time. They're great.
I'm gonna have to revisit them now. Of course, definitely on vocals in sessions. So
yeah, actually, they sounded really great on the acoustic guitars on the Spinal Tap stuff. All the acoustic guitars are through these things.
Amazing.
Because it was sitting there, so I just went, I'll just try this, and I put it up, and I was like, wow, that sounds great. Use it. So, yeah.
Well, super cool, Steve. Good to see you. Take care, and I guess we'll chat when we chat next.
We'll see you next time. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.